There we go. Well, good morning, everybody. Friday morning, Senate Agriculture, and I am stepping in for the chair who is on the phone. And we've got Commissioner Goldstein with us. Commissioner, I'm not sure we've had you in committee, so let's just take a quick moment. I'll say hi. I believe we have connected. Certainly, you've been helpful by email. I'm Chris Pearson, Senator from Chittenden County. And Senator Collmore, we'll just go around my screen here.
Okay. Brian Collmore, State Senator from Rutland County.
Hi.
Anthony?
Anthony Polino, Washington County.
Hi.
You want
Corey.
Bobby to go? Or,
Go ahead,
well,
Corey.
Bobby's on the phone. Corey Parent from Franklin County in Alberg.
And the impossible voice to miss, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Bobby Starr, Senator from Essex, Orleans County. Thank you.
Great.
Thank
Good morning. Yeah,
So-
thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, you go ahead. We'd just
Okay.
like to get an update and, help us understand the concerns that we're hearing from the farming
Sure.
community around the inability to get loans or just some struggles with the program, and any understanding of why it's undersubscribed would be helpful.
Sure. Excellent. Well, thanks. Thanks, Senators and Senator Pearson and Senator Starr for inviting me. So Joan Goldstein, Commissioner of Economic Development. This is the third round of economic recovery grants that were instituted in the last, since COVID began. And the difficulty in this third round was not just felt by the agricultural community, but basically the business community at large. In total, there was $30 million appropriated to it, and we've only been able to issue $3.5 million in grants. And so let's talk about that, right? The first round of grants, we based the calculation on the 2019 revenue. The second round, we based the grant on the amount of loss of revenue. But this third round, by statute, was designed to only help and make eligible those applicants that had a 2020 tax loss. And we also had to take into consideration any previous assistance they received. So what has happened as a result is many applicants find themselves not eligible. Then on the other hand, if they are eligible, we're only paying 3 months of fixed expenses, and the fixed expenses are also prescribed by statute. So if, I don't know if I could share the screen. I know this won't help Bobby, but can I share the screen? I'll show some graphs about what has happened. I don't know how we do that. Do I just hit share screen, or do I need permission to do that? Host disabled participant screen sharing. I could speak to it, and then if you could enable me, that would be great.
You are enabled now, I believe, aren't you?
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
Great.
Do you see it? Okay.
Yeah, it's coming. Yep.
All right, so basically, Senator Starr, what I'm showing is a pie chart or donut chart that shows 3.5 million and where it was distributed across the various counties. And it's a fairly good distribution. It's not really anything out of the ordinary. There's Addison County and Chittenden County, Rutland, all very well represented. And the amount of awards by county, again, Chittenden the most, also Addison, Washington, but then Windsor, Windham. It's kind of a logical distribution in terms of just the size and the amount of people and businesses in those two.
Commissioner, there's some logic to it, but it doesn't track population. So what would you say is the correlation roughly?
Yeah, there was another iteration of these where we did this as a percentage of population, but because this uptake has been so small, we did not go through that exercise. But I just wanted to give a brief on this. Because really what the population is of the people who lost money. So the distribution by NAICS code is very, very interesting. And so the agriculture, forestry, fishing, and hunting in total, oops, I went too fast, bear with me. is 796,000 in awards. So even though we only distributed 3.5 million, agriculture received 796,000. So some farms were eligible. Manufacturing and accommodation and food services obviously was the largest recipient. But as you can see, there's loss across the board. When we look at this, what we like to do is compare the first two rounds with the third round. And this gives a sense of, in round one, we had 52% of those who approached the application ultimately submitted it, and the unsubmitted gave up, right? So that was the first round. And the second round kind of looks similar, right? 57% submitted out of all the people who approached it. When we get to the third round, you could see a big drop off. Only 21% of those who approached it actually submitted. So it's a difficult application. If you review the Act 74 guidelines and the Act 9, details, it's difficult to qualify.
Mr. I hope you don't mind me just jumping in and
No, go ahead.
Committee, if you have questions, just signal, and if I don't see you, just jump in as well. Were people automatically ineligible if they had been through the first two rounds, or were there
No.
some that were repeat?
Yeah, so there were some that were repeat. What we did in the third round is we said we were going to have a priority, and the priority were those who did not receive anything. So we had a first 30-day priority. And then afterwards, we still prioritized those who didn't receive anything. Again, if we were expecting a lot of applications, that would have made a difference. But you were not disqualified. The pie charts I just showed prior to this one is about people who approached it. It wasn't that they were found ineligible. They just couldn't finish it for whatever reason. This pie chart for round one shows of the ones that were submitted, 86% were awarded. This is just to give a compare contrast, right? In the second round, a similar outcome, 84.8% were awarded of the people who ultimately submitted it. Now we get to the third round, and you'll see of the people who ended up submitting, which was such a small percentage of the overall universe, 32% were awarded. And you'll see that the 44% was ineligible, right? They were found ineligible if they had a profit, even if they had a profit of $1. So the design of this was such that there was enormous concern about people being profitable and still getting the money. And as we all know, you could have a small profit and still not be able to pay your bills, or still not be able to pay for your own personal and household expenses, especially the smaller the business, that would be the case, right? So that's the status of, I think we're into a different, that's a different program. So that's the status. But in total, I think the ag community ended up doing well. That's not saying that everybody did. We know that there are people left out. And so in terms of moving forward, our recommendation, I made this recommendation in Senate Economic yesterday, they were asking me like, what formula? I don't think there's one formula or one size that fits all. What I think from the years of doing this, what we've learned is even if you have a formula, the staff at DED has to examine the financials and has to examine the expense load of a particular business. And each of these applications takes such a long time that there is no benefit to creating one formula that fits all. There is no benefit to having it, spelt out in statute, because if we find that there's lesser subscription rate or really good folks are being left behind for whatever reason, we have no discretion to make any change. So if there is a feeling that we need to continue this and continue to help those who were not helped, what we would ask for is the ability to create a program with guidance that we could change if in totality we're finding that it's really missing the mark. Now we have 2 years of results, right? So people could submit their 2020 results, their 2019 results, their 2021 results, and we could see the trend, and we could also examine the expenses. One of the things left out was people didn't have the ability to pay property tax with this. Well, that's a big expense for folks, right? So that was my 2 cents that I explained yesterday. I don't know what direction they will take, but they understand that we were tied. We were tied to what was spelled out.
Mr. Chair, did you have a question?
Yes, on the your third program, how many people, we had 52% applied on the first round, 57% the second round, and the third round was, what percentage of that was signed up or applied? Right,
it was like 21% ended up submitting applications in the third round.
And only 32% of the 21% actually made it.
That is correct.
And I know earlier I had some meetings with a group of farmers that have had an awful time applying, and because of the $1 in profit kicked them out the door. Did you recommend that be eliminated from the program with our Economic Development Committee?
Yeah, I think the biggest complaint from people who were ineligible was this requirement to have a tax loss in 2020. And yeah, we were just like, you can't make a determination that just because someone made a profit that everything's fine. Our plea is that during this time of COVID, the unpredictability, the high risk nature of people operating in business, we either have to be comfortable with the risk that, oh my goodness, we might have paid someone a little bit more than what their loss was, versus the risk of people losing their livelihood. And I think that we would all agree that we need to err on the side of people continuing to operate in business. So it really is a question of, we could determine, like, if there's a loss in profit from one year to the next, we could look at their expense load, irrespective of whether or not they made revenue, or irrespective of the amount, they might have made a profit, but they could have enormous fixed expenses that they're not going to be able to meet. And so I think the team has enough experience. We have enough financial experience to make those determinations. And, again, if we're given that discretion in statute, we could make the change and we could still create guidelines. It's not as if it's going to be a blank check. We're still going to create guidelines. The difference is we're able to adjust and amend if there's something that's gone awfully wrong. To spend a whole session determining proper formula, we just felt like that is not the right ask, right?
Senator Collmore? Oh, sorry, Bobby.
Go ahead, Bobby.
Well, I know from being in business, the last thing you want to show on your tax returns for future business is a tax loss, and so and many times you go without or go without paying yourself or something, so to show that you aren't losing money, because when you go to the bank to borrow money the next trip around and you got your taxes all screwed up where you're showing loss of money, they aren't going to look upon your loan very favorable. So I know our farmers, a lot of them operate right out of their checkbook, and if things aren't going well, they just shut down and don't spend and don't pay the vendors that they hire, and I know a lot of them owe a lot of money for feed and fertilizer and vet bills, and so that's the way they operate.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And many small businesses just, they won't pay themselves, so there is hardship there personally and for their own household. So yeah, I agree.
Thank you.
Senator Collmore.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Pearson. So, Commissioner, I'm jotting down my notes here. it seems like we have two problems here. We have eligibility guidelines, and then we have the difficulty of the application. And I'm just wondering, first of all, whether we could work with Senate Economic Development to come up with, as you suggest, some relaxation of both of those situations. But I'm also curious, is there a deadline for using the money we have? What seems to be about $26.5 million left to pass out. How much time have we got left from the federal government to use this?
I think the ARPA is that funds have to be obligated by the end of December of 24. So I think there is time. I don't think we're up against a time limit. I think what we have to do is we would have to change the application anyway, even if nothing was changed. And that's because we launched this last June and we asked for financials up until April. So we would have to change that just to reflect the passage of time. I think what we're doing is not changing anything until we hear from you all about how to go forward, just because of all the complaints. Yeah, I mean, another thing I would add is that because it was so complex, maybe not complex, but very stringent, we also had to have it programmed that way within the grant application system, which was very costly. And then on top of that, just administering this and reviewing this was incredibly difficult. Like it would take sometimes 40 minutes for one application. So, or longer, because then we would send back for incomplete and then they come back. So a lot of iterations on this. So yeah, I do think that's a great idea to get together with Senate Economic Development to come up with a plan. I mean, I know there's discussion about different carve-outs. I know that performing arts is looking for a carve-out for just performing arts. I know agriculture also, and hospitality, but you know, it starts getting difficult. There's going to be somebody left out if we do it that way. So it might be better to just have a broad pool that has, you know, some guidelines that, you know, we're not giving it to people who are doing A-OK, that there needs to be a determination. And like I said, we're doing the analysis anyway. You know, the formula doesn't make it any easier. We still have to examine everyone's financials and examine their expense load. So that would be great.
Yeah, and not necessarily do I want more people applying than money we have available, but we're in the complete opposite situation right now. And to me, that's equally as concerning. So, I mean, ideally, you'd want enough money to satisfy everybody that needs it, and everything would be, you know, evenly split. But I'd be interested in working with Senate Economic Development. I don't know about the rest of the committee members, but to me, this doesn't seem like an unsolvable problem at all.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I also, you know, what's interesting is now with the spikes in COVID, you know, we're still in this. Like there are still people that are going to be impacted as we speak. So there needs to be something that's a little bit broader so that we could adjust as this virus takes its toll and changes our lives. Yeah, that would be much more beneficial.
Thank you for your work so far.
Thank you.
So I have a couple questions, Commissioner, that your presentation makes me think of. It's clear the formula was too restrictive. That's different, though, from the difficulty of the application process. And Chair Starr was kind of poking at this. Did you feel like the difficulty was in statute, or is there a process that you all are working on to make it easier and more straightforward so that eligible people, you know, don't get discouraged just from, you know, this is particularly true in the, I would say maybe in the ag community where a lot of businesses are run out of the kitchen. Could you just comment on that?
Yeah, so the difficulty is that, I mean, the actual application, like the interface and everything, it's not that that's difficult. It's the supporting documentation that's necessary, right? There's like, you have to upload your financial, your tax returns, you have to upload your P&L. Some people, the P&L is really like their checkbook, so it's done on a cash basis. So it gets complicated. We are paying 3 months of fixed expenses. Some people pay expenses quarterly. You know, so there's all these different calculations that had to occur, not just, as I said, for the applicant, but also for the reviewer to figure out what exactly is going on. On top of all that, you know, we have the scrutiny of the auditor and everyone else about, are we checking all of this? So it would be great to be able to be a little bit more lenient. I just don't know what that looks like, right? So I mean, I'm open to ideas. I don't know what that looks like. Generally speaking, many of the businesses that received grant money in all rounds are small businesses. Like, I think the lion's share was something like less than 5 employees. So they were all kind of in that same boat. There were people who don't necessarily use a P&L, or they just, bring their receipts to the accountant or something, or the bookkeeper. So we recognize all that. We're just not sure the way around it. And I think it all comes down to just how comfortable are we all collectively with risk of fraud and risk of people getting more than what they're entitled to.
I'm also curious if you've considered a delineation. A business that shows a profit that didn't pay its principal is not a profitable business in my mind, and that's very different in a quite a small business compared to a large corporation that is always printing paychecks on schedule and then truing up, has a reserve, can carry a loss, etc. So I'm wondering if you've considered a delineation that would allow us to say, if you're a small business and you're showing a profit, but in fact, people have taken a pay cut that would effectively undermine that profit, we would treat you differently. Has there been that kind of discussion? Is that a strategy going forward in your mind?
We have not. I guess my only question would be just how would we do that? So it always comes down to, how do we operationalize something like that, and how are we sure to be fair? So historically, we have not considered that, like, differences amongst the size of the business. So I don't know if that's something you want to institute. I guess the question would just be, how do we operationalize that? How do we prove that they did that? So I do think, though, that because of the history of 2020, 2019, 2020, 2021, I think we could make determinations based on the delta in those results. But, look, there are many grant programs throughout state government and even throughout the agency where we don't have these formulas and these mandates. It's more like, all right, let's look at what is the project? What is the application? What is the financial status of the applicant? And we can make determinations accordingly. And I think that's what we're asking for here. Is just, you can't do one size fits all. You can do carve outs. We just have to think about how to operationalize that. And, there's always a way forward. It's just, I think, a question of how comfortable we are with risk. And, one way, shape, or form, we were criticized for doing this based on revenue loss. And so, they went in on last session and said, all right, we're not going to do it that way. We're going to do it based on profitability. So in some ways, we got what we deserved, right? We said we were going to be stringent. We were stringent, and guess what? It's underutilized. So,
do you picture going?
Did you
Go ahead, Bobby.
I'm wondering, Commissioner, if you presented anything solid to economic development yesterday, and if it's something that we can go in and promote with the chairman and the committee over there.
Yeah, I think I basically did a similar presentation. We reviewed the results of all the programs that we've instituted since May. But on this, I did do the same testimony, which was about this broader discretion. So, for example, in the first round of grants, in statute, it just said that the agency would come up with a formula to disperse grants. So, and then we were able to act very, very quickly. And then when we realized there was underutilization, we bumped up the amount for hospitality. So it's that type of, it's that type of discretion that I think gives us the flexibility. When the formula is all spelled out in statute, we can't do anything except wait for the next session. So I know that's not as specific as everybody would like, and I know that that's what Senator Sorokin asked me for, but we're kind of hesitant to do that. We did that last year, and it just got turned around. So we kind of want to know what you all are thinking, and we'll just express what our preference is in terms of being able to design and then redesign as needed.
Mr. Chair, you good?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like we need to open this thing up. We certainly know that many small businesses are still hurting, and it isn't like our small businesses operate like the hospitals and they just come in and get more money as they need it, and there's millions and millions there, or the school systems. Our little family operated businesses around the state, I haven't seen any of them splurging in the last few years, and so we certainly know that they need help. I think we've got to get this thing broadened and opened up, and if the auditor gets nervous about it, tough luck, so that's where I am.
Yeah, I would add, a couple more questions. Is there a thinking that now, you mentioned we now have the 3 years of experience effectively, or at least 2 full years through the pandemic for businesses. Is there a thinking that you'd like to be willing to look back and say, okay, you did pretty well in 2021, but we acknowledge some loss in 20, or what it sounded like you have an approach there, but I wasn't quite understanding.
It's just to examine the trend. Like, I think we simplistically in round 2 looked at the drop in revenue, right? But the good news on the simplistic methodology is that, most people were able to get in quickly, show that there was this loss of revenue. If we look at their loss in revenue, their loss in profitability, and also the type of business model, like some have more fixed expenses than others, we can make a determination. Now, it doesn't mean willy-nilly, and I haven't figured out exactly like how we would do that, because what we've found throughout this process is every business is so different. And, we'd want to look at it and see, well, what are they claiming? What can't they pay right now? Like, what is the issue? So maybe what I'm anticipating, it wouldn't be a deluge of applications. I'm anticipating that people would come in who are still suffering, or people who, like right now, are not closing, but have limited hours because of workforce, or, had to shut down because workforce was sick, or, any number of these COVID related things. It's typically not just about, okay, you lost revenue in 2020. Right, this thing is still ongoing. So I do think there has to be some judgments about what that particular business is doing, what industry they're in, are they closed, what's the uncertainty, and what type of fixed expenses are they facing. So
one example I've heard is a business that also has part of its business in another state had been ineligible because each state assumed they were kind of housed in the opposite, and in fact, this business that I heard from was getting aid, was eligible for aid in neither because of its co-location. So I agree with you. There's a lot of merit to more flexibility. Round 1, we did it in 3 weeks or something. So of course we empowered the agency, and in round 2. We rightly, I think, we're a little more cautious, but it would be my hope that the administration doesn't wait to react, but rather is sort of daily engaged in the discussion. That this has been a critique of mine, of not you necessarily. I haven't worked with you, but of folks in the Scott administration, of been sort of a little late sometimes, and you know, I just would express my hope that you or folks that you're working closely with can be in on many of those discussions and build it together, because I think we have a great opportunity here, and will be richer if you're able to help us take some of the ideas and help us understand what it really means to actualize that and put those on the ground.
Happy to. Yeah.
Other questions from committee? Okay, Commissioner, thank you. We'll look to keep our tabs on this and connect with our allies and our friends in Senate Economic Development, and please don't hesitate to reach back out to us if there are particularly questions around food systems and farming community.
Will do.
Thank you.
Take care.
And if we could ask you to
Thank
stop
you.
sharing your screen so I could see my folks here.
If I can learn how to do that. Hold on. Stop. Oh, here. Okay.
Okay,
Thanks.
wonderful.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, let's see here. Cheering by fire. Let's see. I do have here we go. So I think we'll turn now to Gus. Thank you for joining us. We have Chair Starr on the phone. He's had some internet issues up his way. So I'll run the meeting, but he's here and of course is not shy and will chime in as needed. Gus, I think on our agenda you have Jen, but I'm not seeing Jen. So I see other folks from your organization. So if it's okay with you, Gus, I'll turn it over to you, and you can introduce Mariah and Callie and tell us, it's sort of your show. You tell us how you want to run your testimony, okay?
Okay, thank you very much for having me. For the record, I'm Gus Seelig, Director for the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. It's always great to be with the Senate Ag Committee, and we look forward to reporting to you as the session goes on, both on our viability program and development rights work, and also the Rural Economic Development Initiative work that started. All of those things started with your committee and with Chair Starr. I understand today you really wanted our input on the bridge program, and so I know almost nothing about the bridge program. And so I'm going to introduce you to our staff. And in doing that, I'm going to say Liz Gleason, the director of the viability program, had her second child about 3 weeks ago. So she's on parenting leave. You'll be able to visit with her again in March. And today I'm introducing Callie Hastings, who's our program manager in viability. She's been with us a little under a year, but has a long history as part of the ag community and is doing great work. And Mariah Noth, who's our outreach and communications person. She is managing the READY program. I'm pleased to tell you that we helped, I think, get 8 value-added producer grants for Vermont this year, and that program is just continuing to go great guns, providing grant writing assistance to rural communities and businesses in rural communities all over the state. And we're happy to talk about that more today or another time. And I know that you just heard from the Dairy Task Force, and I know they have a series of recommendations that relate to dairy in general and some to VHCB. We're happy to come back and talk about that. But I'm really going to turn it over to them to talk about the bridge program. We've had at least one consultant and some of our other providers working with farmers who have tried to get bridge assistance, and they can talk in much more detail than I could about what some of the challenges have been.
Great, thank you. Well, will we go to Mariah first, or what would you like?
I think we'll, if you folks don't mind, we just have a couple slides that we'd like to pull up to just give a little bit of background for the committee, since this is our first time here this year. And I think Callie's got those slides queued up, and then we can kind of dive into your questions.
Sounds good. Linda, is Callie able to share her screen?
Yes.
Super, take it away. Welcome.
Okay. Hi. I think, let me just give this a try and see if it's going to work. Thumbs up from anybody that you see a screen. Okay, great. Nice to meet everybody. My name is Callie Hastings, and I'm the program manager for the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board Farm and Forest Viability Program. I'm very excited to see everybody here. So I just wanted to do a quick overview of some of our work, just the start of the season here, and then we can dive into some more details on the bridge program, or if there's anything else that folks want to get into, we can do that as well. So I just want to make sure everything's functioning here. You seeing a second slide? Okay,
yep.
Great. So we've been at this work for 19 years, doing it business advising and transition planning support. Over these years, we've served 850 plus businesses, farm, food, and forest businesses, and it's very diverse in terms of the type of businesses. In dairy, there's anything from raw milk to conventional to grass-fed to organic, veggie farmers, forestry businesses, just kind of any business you can think of, we've probably served them. The way we do it is we contract with service providers across the state, organizations such as UVM Extension, the Center for an Agricultural Economy, Land for Good, NOFA Vermont, and the Intervale Center. Those are longstanding relationships, and they have teams of business advisors in their organizations that basically execute the program, and we partner with them and their consultants to work with the businesses. Our job is to chat with the farm and forest businesses and learn about their needs and their wants and their goals long-term, and then to find the business advisor that we think will best meet those needs. So it's a pretty kind of curated process. We talk pretty in depth with them about what they are looking for. And then within our network of people with tons and tons of experience, we try to find the right fit. And then they go about working together, usually for about 2 years on one-on-one business planning or transfer planning. The program is pretty unique in terms of the level of in-depth advising. The one-on-one work is very effective and very specific to this program. So they'll work on financial analysis, accessing resources and other specialists, planning investments, short-term, long-term planning for the business, strategic planning, and then in succession and transition planning, it's often quite complicated and can involve retirement planning, real estate interactions, transferring to the next generation, or trying to actually seek out a buyer, or it could be a straight up exit plan with strategy connected to it. And 1 out of 3 of the clients that we serve are involved in transfer or succession planning. So that's kind of an overview on what we do. And I think we can chat a little bit as well about some of the COVID recovery that we've been involved in over the past year or two. And Mariah could speak to that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Callie. So just to kind of go off of our general program overview that Callie shared in the last, I guess, nearly 2 years now. Wild to think that we've been in a pandemic this long, but starting in March and April of 2020, we recognized that though we'd had, such great success with this long-term, really individualized, comprehensive program, that we still needed to offer that to folks, but that we were also seeing a significantly increased need and just any kind of support to navigate, increased costs, sales through the floor, lots of different things that folks were navigating, including navigating different relief grant programs and how to access them. And so we launched a program that is parallel to our longer term advising program that is still presently ongoing, definitely in a smaller form than when it originally started back in the spring of 2020. But the program, again, has focused really on supporting folks with kind of immediate urgent needs related to cash flow and financial planning, with navigating grant applications. Those ranged from, those offered by the Agency of Commerce that Joan Goldstein described earlier in her presentation, as well as those offered by the Agency of Agriculture and different federal grants as well. And so we supported folks through those, actually helping 400 agricultural producers access the Agency of Agriculture's grant specifically. But as you can see in kind of the stats down below, over 80% of the 500 plus businesses we served through this program thus far have been supported in some way with navigating relief funding and those applications. And as you can see, again, a pretty wide spread of folks that we've served through this program, the majority of which 57% being dairy. And again, that ranges from organic, conventional, grass-fed, and as well as we've supported some folks in the value-added processing space also. And so, yeah, it's been, I think, quite a successful program. And again, we're now seeing this a shift in 2021 from kind of in a very intense, urgent time to again moving toward where there are potentially less relief programs available to apply to, though we are definitely still helping folks through that. And more looking at planning for resilience and looking at what are the next steps, how do we navigate in this new economy, expenses have changed, and you know, different interactions with labor and how to help those businesses not only survive this time, but be stronger going forward. So that's kind of in a nutshell what that program has been and continues to be, and happy to answer any questions on that or kind of dive into our network's experience with the Bridge Grant program.
Any questions, committee?
No, I think it'd be good to hear their experience with the Bridge program. That would be real good.
Awesome, great. We can dive right into that. Callie, did you want to pull up just a couple of those slides that we have too? Awesome, thank you so much. So I would say, you know, we tuned in a little bit to the earlier testimony this morning, and I would say we would absolutely agree with everything that Commissioner Goldstein has shared as well about the program in terms of kind of where the potential challenge points have been for folks, particularly in the agricultural and working lands community, to access these grants, but also recognize that, you know, these grants were created with a really kind of particular purpose in mind to kind of provide funding to those who had not received any funding previously or very little funding. And so I think that also speaks to a lot of the success of the prior programs last year in terms of agricultural folks were really able to access a lot of different resources. And I think we're finding that in many cases, you know, as things have progressed, like that filled a void and an urgent need, but that there are still a lot of challenges, both financially and otherwise, that businesses are facing. That this particular grant program has been hard to meet those really particular needs. So I guess just kind of diving into a couple of the key areas of how our network, our consultants have been specifically working with businesses on the ground, as Callie described a little bit earlier, and helping folks, you know, put together their documentation, actually, you know, fill out applications in some cases, and understand whether they are eligible for these programs and kind of working them through the whole process. So I'll just kind of go into a little bit of a summary of the parts of this program that we have, you know, found that our businesses may or may not be challenged with, and some potential alternate opportunities that we could potentially recommend. So in terms of eligibility, again, as you folks heard about earlier, the net loss requirement is, I think, one of the kind of largest limiting factors for businesses in the ag sector. Again, that $1 of profit makes folks ineligible. So this requirement could exclude businesses with who show declines in their profit that are significant and challenging for them, especially in the case of sole proprietors who, you know, their profit is their household income. So if that is $1, that is, you know, as we'd expect, you know, not enough to make ends meet. We also see a lot of examples of businesses that have actually shrunk their operation sizes to mitigate losses due to COVID. And so there's kind of that group of folks that doesn't really fit into this mold of the program as well. And as you know, we shared previously, the programs that had come out earlier days of the pandemic targeted a broader audience, and that those, you know, compared income pre-pandemic to post-pandemic, or in the case of some of the grants that came through the Agency of Agriculture, that they were actually able to compensate for new COVID-related expenses, which we don't see this particular program as much engaging in that way. But that is also based on kind of its original intent and purpose. Callie, we can jump to the next slide. And so kind of the other category that we've received some feedback around is around the application process and documentation required. And I think that this is not particularly, just about this program, but really all of the relief programs. I think our producers have, been challenged by a totally new process. A lot of folks had not, worked in this space of filling out grant applications, or as was mentioned earlier, did not have the, exact template documents that would easily fit into the, the profit and loss statements that are required based on kind of their unique business and how their cash flow works. So we've seen some of those challenges. In addition, there's of course the internet connection challenge that we definitely faced over the last couple of years, but one that we feel that our team of consultants that work with the businesses have really been able to help fill that need and get folks to where they need to be. Though I could see definitely a need for additional, tech related support, so that way folks who have the financial skills and background can really hone in on helping the businesses get that documentation together and streamline kind of the uploading process into an online application. Again, as was mentioned earlier, the eligible fixed cost being a limitation in some cases. We see a lot of our working lands businesses really like the cost that they're struggling with are more in the category of cost of goods sold and labor. So we're seeing, increased packaging costs, a variety of supply chain challenges, health and safety concerns, or in order to try to hold on to that labor, needing to pay them more, or offer additional benefits, or making them also feel comfortable and safe in that environment by making infrastructure investments. So there's a kind of a lot wrapped up there that folks are struggling with that don't necessarily fall into the categories of the fixed expenses that are covered under this program. And then I would say overarchingly as well, and again, this applies to a variety of relief programs out there, that there's simply a fatigue in terms of it's been a long haul, and folks are definitely tired, and we're doing our best to make sure that folks are aware of those resources and getting to engage with them as much as possible. But that, going forward, the more streamlined we can make these processes for, the individuals on the ground, I think that would be really helpful for them. So yeah, I'm happy to dive into any questions, or if there's, parts of the programs that we can be more specific about, please feel free to let me know.
Yeah, Chris?
Yeah, Senator Chair Stark, go ahead.
I was just wondering if, are you receiving a lot of requests for help from the farming and forestry industry to get help to apply for these grants and loans?
I would say that we're definitely seeing a continued and consistent need. I receive a lot of calls and emails around, what resources are available. And, the conversation is usually like, there are a variety of resources, but they're not usually, simple grant opportunities, which is what a lot of people are looking for. I think that there are actually some pretty favorable loans out there, but I think as even pre-pandemic, it's our agricultural producers are quite leveraged already, so that doesn't always feel like an option for them. So I'd say we're still getting consistently asked about what resources are available, and I think both to compensate for less profits, but also from folks who are interested in making investments in their business or needing to change or diversify or grow certain elements and feeling like there's not potentially enough flexible money for that, for those type of activities.
So a lot of, if everybody was doing okay, they wouldn't be calling them. That's the way I look at it. And so I guess the need is out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mayor Collmore.
Thank you, Senator Pearson. So Mariah, I just want to let you know I appreciate the work that you and Callie and Gus's team, and Gus, of course, is doing in this regard. But I'm very sensitive to the fatigue factor, so to speak. And I'm wondering, and you may not know this right off the bat, how many pages or questions are on the application? In other words, you know, we go back to that famous statement, I'm from the government and I'm here to help, and everybody kind of groans and says, oh gosh, here's another 18-page application that we got to fill out with all this attendant sort of documentation attached to it. And I'm guessing that that's part of the fatigue factor. I mean, it would be for most of us, I think, that, you know, have to fill out a form to get something done. How complicated do you see that? How many pages and that sort of thing, if you can answer?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. And I haven't seen the full application or completed one myself. I could definitely get more information from our service providers around like how exactly complex it is. But I would say the feedback that we've received thus far is that it really ranges depending on where a particular business is at in their financial documentation. So we've definitely seen, you know, those who've been through our program, our viability program, and who have developed those recent statements and already have profit and loss documentation that fits into kind of a pro forma or a standard way that you know, different financial organizations would want to see those numbers. Those folks, it is much easier and quicker to accomplish the process, but I would say the largest amount of time is probably actually spent outside of the application in getting these documents together. And I would say also in the case of this particular program, but others as well, the determination factor of eligibility being a bit of a time-consuming process in and of itself, especially prior to when folks may have had their tax returns available for 2020. So I'd say the bulk of the process is identifying, locating, and or creating the financial documentation that is needed in order for the program to make these decisions. And I would say our advisors who work on the program, so when it's a professional assisting someone who has, you know, a decent amount of documentation and just needs to help them thread those pieces, I would say it's still a few hours process, even in those cases.
Yeah, and I think Commissioner Goldstein mentioned that, and I may be misquoting her, so forgive me if I am, but she said something like it took 40 minutes for the application, once it's received, to go through. So, I mean, if you take an 8-hour day, that doesn't move too many applications through the process. And not that I certainly don't think that we want a situation where somebody just says, hi, it's me, I need $100,000, here's where to send the check, thank you very much. I mean, it has to be a little bit more involved than that, but it seems like there's some work to be done on streamlining, as you mentioned, the application. And I think we're going to work with our colleagues across the hall in Senate Economic Development to get this working. So thank you again very much for all your work.
Absolutely, thank you.
Do you have a sense, Mariah, I should have asked the commissioner this, the average size of grants or assistance once people do get through?
Again, I would say it really ranges, and it depends really on kind of the scale of the business, and also, you know, even a smaller grant size for a very small business may be extremely critical and really useful. So I would say it really definitely ranges. I would say the larger dairies have had the most success with getting larger grants, though that's also a product of having the cash flow deficit. So it's, you know, pros and cons, I would say.
Yeah, they also have bookkeepers, and you know, I mean that's what bugs me is it's hard to make it really simple, you know, on down the pyramid, if you like. But, all right, thank you. Other questions?
Chris, I have one for Gus. Not relating to the loan program, but a different issue that he looks after. So
he's here.
Still on?
He's
Yeah.
still here, and he didn't cringe when you mentioned his name. So go ahead.
Well, we've worked together for a long time. I was just wondering, Gus, how the labor housing program was going. I know you were going to set some money aside to help farm labor housing, and of course housing's a big issue not only in ag, but in all around the state. I was wondering, how's your farm labor housing program? Is it up and going yet?
So here's the status. And just to remind the committee, a little over a year ago, we hired a consultant to do a survey of what the needs were for farm labor housing. He issued a report just about this time last year that called for primarily a repair program, based on all the research and interviews he had done all over the state. By the time you left last spring, you'd appropriated a fair amount of funding, and we said we would set aside a little over $1 million specifically targeted toward farm labor housing. And since then, we've had a couple focus groups meet with the people in the farm community. And then we issued just to hear from them directly what they thought they needed. We issued an RFP looking for a provider to manage the program. We got several bids, and we awarded funding, or in the process of awarding funding this just in the last few weeks, to a team led by the Champlain Housing Trust, because they operate in Franklin and Addison counties where we have such a large amount of farms. They're partnering with Extension and UVM and others around the state. So they're going to work with Rural Edge, Senator Starr, in your part of the state to provide repair services. We've awarded $500,000 to capitalize a fund. We have more money set aside. And one of the things we heard from one focus group of farmers we met with was the need for not just a repair program, but for new housing on farms and to replace housing. And we've had an ongoing discussion with Milk with Dignity, and we will be working over the next couple months to at least pilot the idea of doing energy efficient replacement housing on some farms with them. So that I expect the program to launch over the next 2 months, and for applications to be open this spring, and for repairs to begin this spring, summer, and fall. So that's the status. I would also say to you, as the governor certainly shouted out in his State of the State the need for more investment in housing, and as you talk with your colleagues down the hall on the Housing and Economic Development Committee, that urging them to make sure that there's room for more funding for farm labor housing, I think would be important. We will not do everything we need to do. Last thing I'll say is we had a meeting with VITA a few weeks ago. They don't have grant money for housing, but they did come into a new federal source, I think, where they're prepared to make extremely low interest loans. So we're going to get them together with the Champlain Housing Trust to see whether we can leverage some of their low interest money to meet this need.
Yeah. Well, that sounds good, Gus, and I'm glad. It sounds like you've done a lot of work and just about ready to get that going.
Yeah.
Well, we had several meetings last year in regards to farm labor housing, and just wanted an update on how that was coming. So that's good. Thank you.
Yeah, I apologize that it hasn't gone faster. As you know, the legislature gave us a lot of program to stand up this year, and we're going as fast as we possibly can. I'm a little frustrated. We aren't a little further along, but I think, and Senator Pearson probably knows the work of Champlain Housing Trust because he's in their part of the state the most. They're very committed to this work, and their chief operating officer is actually somebody who was married to a dairy farmer for a long time, grew up in I believe a meat processing business up in Franklin County. So they have not just some housing background, but among their staff, some expertise with working with the farm community. And I think their partnership with UVM will hopefully help where they don't have the farming knowledge to bridge some of the knowledge they need to, some of the things they need to learn about the farm community. So I'm optimistic we'll hopefully have at least the first 25 homes get underway in terms of repair work this year.
Yeah, and the other quick question is it better for you to leave, instead of putting strings on the money, to let you be more flexible, so if you need to move some of that housing money to the farm labor housing, that, you can do it, or should there be strings attached? Because, if we go and put, like, of the, say, the 50 million that the governor's talking about, put 5 million in it, isn't it better to just let you shuffle the money to where it's needed and expect you to use everyone fairly?
Well, the short answer that almost any bureaucrat would give you is yes, give me flexibility. At the same time, I think the role of the Ag Committee should be to be advocates for the agriculture community, and you always are. And so, while I don't want what somebody recently called policy shackles, it is always good when I'm meeting with the appropriators, and I'll see you with Senator Kitchell before the session ends, for there to be a clear expectation not to forget about agriculture. So without a specific earmark, but a clear intent that the ag community needs to benefit as well, I think that's a good thing. So just being on the record that's an expectation that we get from Senator Sorokin's committee and Senator Kitchell's committee, being asked the question and then being asked to report back on what we did helps to keep us all accountable, whether it's me or anybody else. So yes, I want flexibility, but I also think you have your role to play as advocates for the ag community. That's always been part of our mission, to serve the agriculture community in a number of ways, through the viability program, through the development rights program, and now with our housing work as well.
Yeah, well, I'll be sure and bring that up in the other room.
Thank you.
Gus, I have a question that relates to sort of the succession planning and that consultation, and also this housing money. Is your are you always in a reactive, so you're waiting for people to come to you, or are you soliciting? I guess I worry particularly for smaller farmers, but if we're talking about the housing, that's going to mean it's a certain level of a farm, a size of a farm that has on-farm housing, which the agency of ag knows, though they're all registered with the agency. So I guess I'm curious if there's any proactive, or if we should ask the agency to be proactive, or if you all are waiting for the phone to ring or an email to come in. Could you just describe how it works for you, or maybe Mariah?
Well, what I would say to you in general, and Mariah will add and Callie can add, is that, when Senator Starr and I were both younger and this thing was starting, it took a lot of outreach to the ag community. And back then, Senator Polino was also more of an advocacy role. And as a more established institution today, 34 years later, and with Viability having a 19-year track record, people are well aware of the various kinds of resources that we can bring to the table, both the professionals who work with the ag community, the Agency of Agriculture, and really, I think among the best things is word of mouth from one farmer, one producer to another. Having said that, and the organizations that we contract with in terms of the viability program, if we're talking about succession planning, have a set of relationships across the ag community, whether it's Extension, the Intervale, NOFA Vermont, or other providers. Having said that, could we be doing more business if we knew that our funding for viability, and I think this goes to recommendations that are in the Dairy Revitalization Task Force, if we knew we beefed up with one-time funding this year, the viability program, significantly. But to continue that work in coming years, we're going to need more consistent funding for the viability program that can't just come from one-time funding. And this goes to the farm to plate recommendations in terms of the need for more service provision, and which I think calls for a multi-million-dollar investment and 30 more people in the field. We'd like to grow the work, and that would require more consistent ongoing funding. One way to achieve that, and Senator Starr knows this from the beginnings of our program, is that the law actually provides for us to receive a certain amount of property transfer tax revenue. And we've been well under that number for about the last 10 years. And so getting back to that statutory number would be one way for us to be able to direct more money to viability and for them to be contracting for more service providers. As you guys know, across the state of Vermont and across every profession, whether it's nursing, municipal employees, we have a labor shortage. And so we can't just turn on a light switch and find the skilled people that, whether they're at Extension, at NOFA, at Intervale, or independent contractors. But if we know that there's ongoing funding, I'm confident that we can recruit and our partners can recruit more people, and that we can put in place more resources to help with the succession planning question that I think you're asking and that the Dairy Revitalization Task Force suggests is necessary.
Yeah, and that is a fair answer. And I don't know, I guess I'd be curious, in my mind, when a farm needs help with the program or some of this technical expertise with grants, et cetera, they know where to turn. But I guess I wonder if particularly in the succession planning, if that is also, to me, it's as you've described in previous years, it's an intensely emotional, in addition to economic, questions for families. And unlike prior generations, there probably wasn't that intensity because it was always understood that the farm would stay in the family in many cases. So I'm wondering, or I hope that we can get to the point where it's dependable enough that there can be assertive outreach as opposed to only being able to react when people do come knocking.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that we're entirely reactive, but I would say, and Callie and Mariah, please chime in, we would like to build more capacity. It will take more stability in our funding so that we can tell our partners, yeah, if you hire somebody, the funding is not just there for a year to get to where you'd like us to be and to do more affirmative outreach. Do either of you want to add to that? I see some heads shaking yes. I don't think Senator Starr can see your heads nodding yes, but why don't you just jump in for a moment?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I completely agree with everything you shared, Gus. And just to note on our outreach, I would say I agree that we'd always love to do more outreach and additional resources to make that possible. However, as Gus shared, we do a lot of outreach as our program, whether that's through press or media that farmers are consuming or through our partners. We're very closely partnered with the Agency of Agriculture and make sure information about all of the types of programming that we have, from kind of those shorter term entry point with our COVID program, which has been a really great way for folks to come in and become comfortable with that advising relationship, because that's a whole other layer that many farmers, may or may not have ever been in that kind of relationship before, and may not, it can be a scary process at times. So definitely that's been a really great tool for us as well. Our service providers on the ground, they're connecting individually with farm families all over the state and starting these conversations, you know, at the kitchen table and now at the Zoom screen kitchen table. And I think that there's so much of that happening, but it can take years for folks who are having these conversations to really be ready to dive into an intensive planning process. So that's kind of part of its the outreach in this succession planning case is definitely a long game, but one that we take really seriously and really enjoy being able to engage with. And yeah, I would say so. We're definitely, you know, out there, and our consultants as well. We have plenty of stories of folks, our business advisors and consultants across the state who have made these relationships over decades doing this work, and will say, oh, you know, I was driving through this area and I saw this farm, and so I just stopped by to see how they were doing and talk with them about some of these issues. So we definitely see everything from kind of the broad communications and outreach to really particularly through partners, and then really specifically on the ground as well. But we'd always love to do more. Absolutely.
I could just add one thought on that too. I think just to echo what Gus said about stable funding in the long term, for any of these organizations to add service providers, they can't just add them for a year. And there's really like a pipeline of consultants and business advisors coming in where they usually kind of start with their basic set of skills and do business planning and are kind of working in that area for quite a while. And then they kind of graduate to the next level of succession and transition planning, because that's incredibly complex and takes a lot of experience to really understand the nuances, from being trained mediators to understanding retirement planning. So it actually takes quite a while to also build those skills in the network, which is something we're always talking about and thinking about. And we provide trainings for our service providers on these topics, so that they're getting that professional development. But there's, again, it's like continuing to expand the network involves the robustness of all our trainings, and also that stability and funding to bring people in and be able to keep them so they can develop over the years and meet the businesses where they're at as they grow or transition out.
Wonderful. Well, I think I can go ahead, Bobby.
Yeah, I was just wondering, hey, Gus, on your funding from the transfer tax, how far apart are we on fully funding your percentage?
Well, I guess, you know, last year you gave us a lot of general fund for housing. But in recent years, the transfer tax is going gangbusters across the state of Vermont because, as you all know, the real estate economy is super hot. And were we to be fully funded with the transfer tax, our budget would end up being somewhere near $30 million a year. Our base budget prior to the availability of federal LEAF funding was around $16 million a year. And then, you know, you and the governor did the housing revenue bond, which added housing dollars for a number of years. So we've been well funded, but it's out of the conservation part of our budget that we fund the viability program, not out of the housing part. And some of the federal funding might be hard to use specifically for this program. So, you know, and the transfer tax, the reason it got raised all those years ago was that, you know, fundamentally we intervene in the real estate market, and the transfer tax is a great barometer for how much pressure there is in the real estate market. You know, one of the things that you've heard me say in past years is something close to 10 years ago, I would have said 1/3 of the conservation deals we did had to do with a plan for transfer of a farm. Today, it's more like half. And that's because buying the development rights reduces the capital cost of acquisition so intensively. So that base funding that is the most flexible money we have, lets us make bigger capital investments, and also lets us invest more fully in the viability program, is something I would see this as a really high priority if we had it up to invest in.
Yep. Well, I was just wondering how far apart we were, but sounds like quite a ways on you folks getting your full percentage.
Yeah, back around 2012, we were just about there, and then over about 5 years, it got a little wider, and in the last 2.5 years, because the transfer tax is performing so well, the gap has opened up tremendously.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that info.
And I guess I would just add that more and more, another area where we need dependable ongoing money is in the climate sphere. And there is more and more recognition of the linkage between preserving open land and forest, much of which is owned by farms. So, I would just say, as I think about my own advocacy on your behalf, I think that's an important piece of it that people don't always think. Well, helping farms as their intergenerational shift or whatever is a climate initiative as well. So good. Well, thank you. That's are there other questions or other pieces of information you wanted us to have?
You usually have us in when we provide our annual reports, and we will be sending them over the next few weeks. And we're happy to come back and talk more about succession planning and how to ramp it up and how to assist with those transfers more, or any other issue that's on the committee's mind as you do your work. This year, we've been participating in the task force on what's going to happen to the Horizon farmers. So you let us know when you need us, and we will be available.
Thank you, Gus. And you all are part of the Land Link and trying to get new farmers connected too. I hope we can spend a little bit of time on that down the road, because that's a little more optimistic, positive looking, as opposed to trying to repair some of the challenges of the previous decades. But super.
What's the cat's name, Gus?
Yeah.
This is Jasper.
Jasper.
And
Senator Starr has a cat named Boom Boom.
No, Bum Bum.
Bum Bum. Bum Bum.
Well, one of the advantages of working from home is we get to meet each other's pets.
Yep.
Yeah, Bum Bum hasn't been with me this morning with no screen.
Anyway, thank you again for everything you're doing. We appreciate it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you all very much for your time, and we look forward to continuing the conversation about how we can be helpful. Take care.
Great. Thanks.
Thank
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, is there anything else for us this morning? Or
No, I just planned these two issues. If we were in the State House, it would be, we'd be bumping into Michael and some of the crew from Economic Development to chat with them in regards to, the bridge program. But being separated like we are and have been, it makes it very difficult to drop in the room next door and say, we see there's a little problem and like to help get it resolved. I don't know if any of you folks run into the members from Economic Development. It would be good to chat with them, and I'll make it a point to touch base with Michael in regards to it.
well, I see Michael every afternoon and talk to him from time to time, and Senator Collmore and Senator Polina are with Clarkson. So there ought to be, and let's face it, this isn't controversial. We just want to make sure that they're not neglecting our community here. So I'm sort of optimistic. I will say I'm not sure who to blame. They'd really like to blame our design, I guess, in the legislature, but maybe it's not worth too much time looking backwards and just make sure we get it right moving forward.
Well, I think the auditors has raised some issues that kind of scare people sometimes. You know, I don't care about pointing fingers. I care more deeply about getting it resolved and getting this money back into our economy and helping these small businesses of all types and get it going.
Yep, agreed. All right.
No, I think we're all set. Of course, we got to be on the floor in a little bit. So
Are you going to be able to do? Are you going to be able to do that, Bobby? Can you get somewhere to be on camera?
I don't know. I'll try it. But the issue over at Eric's, they're gone, working, and I don't know his router number to run over there and punch in on. But I'm going to try to figure out something.
Well, good
Just
luck.
so you know, I did look at the calendar, Bobby, and I think we're going to be in a similar position that we were yesterday. There's only 3 things on the calendar, and I think we won't have any action on anything today. I think if there are bills to be introduced, that'll be about all it is. So not to take any pressure off you, but yeah.
Well, that sounds good.
Okay, Linda, I think you can take us offline.